Marcus Rivera had been running for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. He counted every single day because each one felt like a lifetime when you were the most wanted man in the country. His face stared back at him from every newspaper, every television screen, every wanted poster plastered on street corners. The reward money had grown from $50,000 to $2 million, and, still, he remained free. But, freedom was a relative term when you lived like a ghost. Marcus pressed his back against the cold brick wall of the abandoned warehouse, listening carefully for any sound that might indicate the police had found his latest hiding spot. The rain hammered against the broken windows above, creating a steady rhythm that had become his lullaby over the past few weeks. Water dripped through the damaged roof, forming small puddles on the concrete floor where he had made his temporary home. 3 years ago, Marcus Rivera had been a different man entirely. He had been Dr. Marcus Rivera, a respected pediatric surgeon at St. Mary's Hospital, living in a beautiful suburban home with his wife Sarah and their 8-year-old daughter Emma. He had dedicated his life to saving children, working 18-hour days, missing family dinners and school plays because somewhere, a child needed him to repair their broken heart or remove a tumor that threatened their future. The irony was not lost on him that the man who had spent his career saving lives was now wanted for taking one. Marcus pulled out his phone, one of several burner devices he rotated through to avoid detection. He had exactly 17 minutes before he needed to dispose of this one and switch to another. The screen showed no missed calls, no messages. Not that he expected any. Everyone he had ever cared about believed he was a monster now. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to remember the terrible night that had changed everything. It had been a Tuesday evening in September. Marcus had just finished a successful surgery on a 6-year-old boy with a congenital heart defect. The child would live a normal life because of Marcus's skill and dedication. He was driving home, exhausted but satisfied, looking forward to tucking Emma into bed and reading her favorite story about a princess who saved dragons instead of being saved by princes. The rain had been falling that night too, just like tonight. Marcus had been stopped at a red light, barely able to keep his eyes open after the 16-hour surgery, when he noticed the black sedan that had been following him for the past 10 miles. At first, he thought it was coincidence. The city was full of black sedans. But, when the car followed him through 3 unnecessary turns, Marcus knew something was wrong. He had tried calling the police, but his phone had no signal. The jamming device in the sedan was military-grade, something he would learn later during the investigation. Marcus had driven toward the nearest police station, but the sedan had forced him off the main road into an industrial area where the streetlights were broken and security cameras were few. 3 men had gotten out of the sedan. Marcus remembered every detail about them, even now. The leader was tall and thin with a scar running from his left ear to his jawline. He wore an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the rundown industrial area. The second man was shorter but built like a professional wrestler, with tattoos covering his thick arms. The third man stayed by the car, his hand resting on something inside his jacket. Dr. Rivera, the tall man had said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus couldn't place. "We need to have a conversation." Marcus had known immediately that this was about Emma. For the past 6 months, he had been receiving strange phone calls asking about his daughter's schedule, her school, her activities. Sarah had wanted to go to the police, but Marcus had convinced her it was just cranks responding to his high-profile work at the hospital. Wealthy surgeons often attracted unwanted attention from people looking for money or revenge. He had been wrong. "My daughter has nothing to do with whatever this is," Marcus had said, keeping his hands visible and his voice steady. "If you want money, I can write you a check right now." The tall man had smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "This isn't about money, doctor. This is about justice. Your skilled hands saved the wrong child 3 months ago." Marcus had performed hundreds of surgeries in the past 3 months. He saved every child he could, regardless of their background, their parents' wealth, or their circumstances. It was the oath he had taken as a doctor, and it was a principle he had never compromised. "I don't understand," Marcus had said. "The Kozlov boy," the tall man had explained. "Viktor Kozlov's son. You saved his life when you should have let nature take its course." Marcus remembered the case immediately. 7-year-old Dmitry Kozlov had been brought to the hospital with severe internal bleeding after a car accident. The surgery had been complex and dangerous, but Marcus had managed to save the child's life. Viktor Kozlov was a known crime boss, one of the most dangerous men in the city. But his son was just a 7-year-old boy who needed medical help. "I'm a doctor," Marcus had said. "I save lives. That's what I do." And sometimes, the tall man had replied, saving the wrong life costs other lives. Viktor Kozlov's son lived to see another day. "My brother's children did not. Viktor ordered their deaths 2 weeks after you saved his boy." Marcus had felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. This was about revenge, about a cycle of violence that had nothing to do with him except for the fact that he had done his job. "I'm sorry for your loss," Marcus had said carefully. "But I can't choose who lives and who dies based on their family connections. Every child deserves a chance at life. Even the children of monsters? Especially the children of monsters. They might grow up to be better than their parents." The tall man had studied Marcus for a long moment, as if trying to understand a foreign concept. "You really believe that?" "I have to believe that. Otherwise, what's the point of anything?" That's when the shorter man had pulled out his gun. Marcus had been in dangerous situations before. Working in an inner-city hospital meant dealing with gang violence, domestic abuse cases, and other traumas that brought out the worst in people. But he had never had a gun pointed directly at his chest by someone who seemed perfectly willing to use it. "Here's what's going to happen," the tall man had said. "You're going to come with us. We're going to visit your family. Your wife, your daughter. And you're going to watch them pay the price for your misguided compassion." Everything that happened next had occurred in slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously. Marcus had seen the shorter man's finger tighten on the trigger. He had seen the tall man nod almost imperceptibly. He had realized that these men were going to kill him right there in that abandoned lot, and then they were going to drive to his house and kill Sarah and Emma. Marcus had spent his entire adult life using his hands to heal and repair. He had never used them for violence. But when he saw that gun pointing at his heart and thought about Emma sleeping peacefully in her pink bedroom with her stuffed animals lined up on her dresser, something primitive and protective had taken over. He had grabbed the tire iron from his emergency kit and swung it at the shorter man's head before he could fully process what he was doing. The sound of metal connecting with skull had been horrible, a wet crack that Marcus still heard in his nightmares. The man had dropped immediately, blood pooling beneath his head on the wet pavement. The tall man had reached for his own weapon, but Marcus had been faster. The second swing of the tire iron had caught him in the temple. He had fallen beside his partner, his expensive suit soaking up the dirty rainwater. The third man by the car had started shooting immediately. Marcus had felt the bullet graze his shoulder as he dove behind his car. More shots had shattered his rear window and punctured his tires. Marcus had crawled around to the driver's side and managed to get the engine started, even though he was driving on rims. He had made it 6 blocks before the car died completely. By then, he could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had called the police about the gunshots. Marcus had abandoned his car and run into the maze of alleys that crisscrossed the industrial district. He had called Sarah from a payphone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial the numbers. "Marcus?" Sarah's voice had been thick with sleep. "What's wrong? Where are you?" "Listen to me very carefully," Marcus had said. "Take Emma and go to your sister's house right now. Don't pack anything. Don't stop to think about it. Just grab her and go." "Marcus, you're scaring me." "What's happening?" "There are men who want to hurt us. I've bought us some time, but you need to get Emma somewhere safe right now." Sarah had started crying. "Where are you? Are you hurt? I can hear sirens." "I'm okay. But I need you to trust me and do exactly what I'm saying. Take Emma to Janet's house and wait for me to call you." "What about you? Marcus had looked back toward the industrial area where red and blue lights were beginning to flash. He had known, even then, that his life as Dr. Marcus Rivera was over. "I'll figure something out," he had lied. The police had found the two bodies 20 minutes later. The third man had disappeared, along with the black sedan and any evidence that Marcus had been defending himself. The security camera that might have captured the confrontation had been destroyed months earlier and never repaired. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Marcus Rivera was wanted for double homicide. The media had painted him as a respected doctor who had snapped under pressure, possibly because of gambling debts or a drug addiction. The fact that he had disappeared completely was taken as proof of his guilt. The truth was far more complex, but the truth didn't matter when you were running for your life. Marcus had managed to contact a criminal lawyer through intermediaries, a woman named Patricia Hendricks who specialized in cases involving organized crime. She had agreed to meet him in secret, in the basement of a closed restaurant at 2 a.m. "The evidence against you is circumstantial but compelling," she had told him. "2 men dead from blunt force trauma, your tire iron covered in their blood and your fingerprints. No witnesses to support your claim of self-defense. And the third man who was supposedly shooting at you? He doesn't exist according to the police investigation." "But he does exist," Marcus had insisted. "He got away. He probably works for the same people who sent those men to kill my family." Patricia had studied him across the dimly lit table. "I believe you. But belief and proof are different things in a courtroom. The prosecution will argue that you killed those men during a drug deal gone wrong, or because you owed them money, or because you finally cracked under the pressure of your job. What are my options? Turn yourself in and hope we can convince a jury that you acted in self-defense. But without witnesses or physical evidence to support your story, that's a long shot. The other option is to disappear and hope we can eventually find evidence to clear your name." Marcus had thought about Sarah and Emma, probably sitting in Janet's living room wondering when Daddy was coming home. He had thought about his patients, children who depended on him to fix their broken hearts. He had thought about the life he had built over 35 years, now shattered beyond repair in a single night. "If I turn myself in, will my family be safe?" Patricia had hesitated just long enough to give him his answer. "I don't know. If these men were really sent by Viktor Kozlov, then your family is still in danger whether you're in prison or not. Kozlov doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive." That night, Marcus had made the hardest decision of his life. He had called Sarah one last time. "I can't come home," he had told her. "It's not safe for any of us if I come home." Sarah had been crying again. "Marcus, please. We can figure this out together. You didn't do anything wrong. I killed 2 men with a tire iron. Whether I was right or wrong, that makes me dangerous to be around. As long as I'm free, you and Emma have a chance at a normal life. What about you? What kind of life will you have?" Marcus had looked around the abandoned warehouse where he was hiding, at the sleeping bag and canned food that represented his entire world now. "I'll survive. That's enough." "No, it's not enough. You deserve more than that. We deserve more than that." "Maybe someday," Marcus had said, knowing it was another lie. "But not now. Not yet." He had hung up before Sarah could argue further, before he could change his mind and destroy all 3 of their lives. That conversation had been 3 years ago. Marcus had kept moving ever since, staying in abandoned buildings, homeless shelters, and cheap motels that didn't ask for identification. He had learned to change his appearance, to walk differently, to speak differently. He had become invisible in the way that only desperate people could manage. But invisibility came with a price. He hadn't spoken to another human being for more than 5 minutes in over a year. He hadn't touched another person except by accident. He hadn't heard his real name spoken aloud. He had become a ghost haunting his own life. Marcus looked at his watch. 15 minutes left before he needed to dump this phone. He allowed himself to check the news one more time, something he did compulsively even though it usually brought him pain. The headline that greeted him made his blood turn to ice: Kozlov crime family threatens hospital over new security measures. The article was short but devastating. Viktor Kozlov was pressuring St. Mary's Hospital to relax their new visitor screening policies. The hospital had implemented the measures after receiving threats against their staff. Kozlov was claiming that the policies were discriminatory and violated his rights as a parent to visit his son, who was being treated for a recurrence of his heart condition. The article mentioned that Kozlov's son was under the care of Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had taken over Marcus's patient load after his disappearance. It also noted that the hospital was considering hiring additional security, including off-duty police officers and private security guards. Marcus's hands were shaking as he read the article a second time. Kozlov was still after him, still trying to finish what he had started 3 years ago. But now he was threatening innocent people, doctors and nurses who were just trying to do their jobs. Marcus thought about Dr. Walsh, a brilliant surgeon who had been his resident before his disappearance. She was young, talented, and completely unprepared for the kind of danger that came with treating the children of criminals. He thought about the nurses who worked the pediatric ward, kind women who had comforted him during his most difficult cases and who now might be targeted because of his actions. Most of all, he thought about the children. Sick kids who needed surgery, who deserved the best possible care, who might suffer because their hospital was under siege from a crime boss with a personal vendetta. Marcus had spent 3 years running, 3 years hiding, 3 years letting other people deal with the consequences of his choices. Maybe it was time to stop running. He pulled out a different phone, one he had been saving for emergencies. With steady hands, he dialed a number he had memorized but never called. Channel 7 News, this is Rebecca Martinez. Ms. Martinez, this is Dr. Marcus Rivera. I believe you've been looking for me. The silence on the other end of the line lasted for nearly 10 seconds. Rebecca Martinez was the investigative reporter who had been covering his case from the beginning, the only journalist who had ever questioned the official version of events. Dr. Rivera? Is this really you? It's really me. I want to tell my story. But I have conditions. I'm listening. I'll give you an exclusive interview, everything you want to know about what really happened that night. But, in return, I need you to help me with something. Something that might save some lives. What do you need? Marcus looked around the warehouse one more time, at the life he had built out of nothing, at the freedom he was about to give up. I need you to help me turn myself in. But, not to the police. To someone who can actually protect the people I care about. As he spoke, Marcus realized that his 3 years of running were about to come to an end. One way or another, Dr. Marcus Rivera was going home. Rebecca Martinez had been waiting for this phone call for 3 years. As the city's leading investigative reporter, she had covered every angle of the Marcus Rivera case, and something about the official story had never sat right with her. Now, sitting in her cramped office at Channel 7 News at 11 o'clock at night, she was finally talking to the ghost himself. Dr. Rivera, I need to ask you some questions to verify your identity, Rebecca said, grabbing her recorder and notepad. What was the name of your daughter's stuffed rabbit? Mr. Hopscotch, Marcus replied without hesitation. She got him when she was 4 years old at the hospital gift shop after I had to work late on her birthday. He's missing his left ear because Emma's puppy, Buster, chewed it off when she was 6. Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. Those details had never been made public. This was really him. Okay, I believe you. Now tell me what you meant about turning yourself in to someone who can protect people. The police have been looking for you for 3 years. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Rebecca could hear traffic in the background. He was calling from somewhere busy, somewhere public. Smart move for someone who had evaded capture this long. The police can't protect anyone from Viktor Kozlov, Marcus finally said. Half of them are on his payroll, and the other half are too scared to cross him. But there's someone else, someone who's been trying to bring down Kozlov's organization for years. Someone who might be willing to make a deal. Who? Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI. She's been investigating Kozlov for organized crime, racketeering, and murder for the past 5 years. She's clean, she's smart, and she's the only law enforcement officer I trust. Rebecca knew the name. Agent Chen had been featured in several news stories about federal investigations into organized crime. She had a reputation for being incorruptible and relentless. What kind of deal are you thinking about? I give myself up and testify about what really happened that night. I tell them everything I know about the men who tried to kill me and my family. In exchange, the FBI provides protection for my wife and daughter, and for the doctors and staff at St. Mary's Hospital. It sounded reasonable, but Rebecca knew the justice system was more complicated than that. Marcus, you've been a fugitive for 3 years. Even if you cooperate, you're still looking at serious charges. Murder in the second degree, evading arrest, possibly more. I know, Marcus said quietly. I've accepted that. I'm not running anymore because I want my freedom back. I'm doing this because innocent people are going to die if Kozlov isn't stopped. Rebecca had covered enough crime stories to recognize the sound of genuine desperation in someone's voice. Marcus Rivera wasn't just tired of running, he was terrified that his continued freedom was putting other people in danger. Tell me about the threats to the hospital, Rebecca said. How do you know about those? Marcus explained about the news article he had just read, about Viktor Kozlov's pressure campaign against St. Mary's Hospital. As he talked, Rebecca was already pulling up her own sources, verifying the information against what she had heard through her contacts in law enforcement. Marcus, there's something you should know, Rebecca said slowly. The threats against the hospital aren't new. They've been escalating for months. 3 doctors have received death threats. 2 nurses have had their cars vandalized. And, last week, someone broke into Dr. Walsh's apartment and left a dead rat on her kitchen table with a note that said, "Stop saving the wrong children." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Is she okay? Marcus finally asked. She's alive, but she's scared. The hospital administration is considering transferring Kozlov's son to another facility, but they're afraid that will just make things worse. It will make things worse, Marcus said. Kozlov doesn't respond well to rejection. If they transfer his son, he'll see it as a declaration of war. Rebecca could hear the pain in Marcus's voice. This man had spent 3 years in hiding, but he was still thinking like a doctor, still worried about his patients and colleagues. Marcus, I'll help you contact Agent Chen, but I need something from you first. I need you to tell me your story, the real story, everything that happened that night. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. Not over the phone, Marcus said. Too risky. Can you meet me somewhere? Rebecca looked at the clock. It was almost midnight, and she was being asked to meet the city's most wanted fugitive at an undisclosed location. It was either the story of a lifetime or a very elaborate way to get herself killed. Where? Do you know the old Riverside Cemetery on 5th Street? Rebecca knew it. The cemetery had been abandoned for decades, its headstones weathered and broken, its grounds overgrown with weeds. It was the kind of place where a desperate man might feel safe, and where a reporter might disappear without a trace. I know it. There's a mausoleum in the center of the cemetery, the Morrison family crypt. Meet me there in 1 hour. Come alone, and bring a way to contact Agent Chen. Marcus, this sounds, I know how it sounds. But I'm running out of time, and so are the people at that hospital. 1 hour. The line went dead. Rebecca stared at her phone for a long moment, weighing her options. Meeting a wanted murderer in an abandoned cemetery at 1 in the morning was not exactly standard journalistic practice. But, if Marcus Rivera was telling the truth, if he really was an innocent man who had been framed by organized crime, then this story could expose one of the biggest conspiracies in the city's history. She made her decision. Rebecca spent the next 45 minutes making phone calls and gathering information. She contacted Agent Sarah Chen's office and left an urgent message explaining that she had information about the Marcus Rivera case and the Kozlov investigation. She called her editor and left a voicemail about following up on a lead. She even called her sister and asked her to check on her apartment if she didn't call back by 6 in the morning. At 12:45 a.m., Rebecca drove to Riverside Cemetery. The cemetery was even more eerie than she remembered. The wrought iron gates had been chained shut years ago, but there were gaps in the fence where someone could slip through if they were determined enough. Rebecca parked her car 2 blocks away and walked to the cemetery, carrying only her recorder, her phone, and a small canister of pepper spray. The mausoleum was exactly where Marcus had said it would be, a crumbling stone structure that had once been grand but was now covered in graffiti and missing several of its carved angels. Rebecca approached carefully, listening for any sound that might indicate danger. "Ms. Martinez?" Rebecca spun around, her heart pounding. Marcus Rivera emerged from behind a large headstone, moving slowly with his hands visible. In the dim light from her phone's flashlight, Rebecca could see that 3 years of hiding had changed him dramatically. The Marcus Rivera she remembered from news photos had been a confident, well-dressed man with kind eyes and a warm smile. The man standing before her now was thin almost to the point of gauntness, with long hair and a beard that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion etched into his face. His clothes were clean but worn, and he moved with the careful alertness of someone who had learned to expect danger from every shadow. But his eyes were the same. Kind, intelligent, and deeply sad. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said. "I know this isn't exactly a normal interview location." "I've had stranger meetings," Rebecca replied, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "Though usually not with wanted fugitives." Marcus smiled, and for a moment Rebecca could see the man he used to be. "Fair point. Should we sit down? This is going to take a while." They sat on a stone bench near the mausoleum, and Rebecca activated her recorder. For the next 2 hours, Marcus Rivera told her everything. He talked about that rainy night 3 years ago, about the men who had threatened his family, about the impossible choice between saving his own life and protecting the people he loved. He described the moment when he realized that the justice system couldn't help him, that the only way to keep Sarah and Emma safe was to disappear completely. But, most of all, he talked about the guilt. The guilt of leaving his family, of abandoning his patients, of allowing other people to suffer the consequences of his choices. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Marcus asked as he finished his story. "It's not the running, or the hiding, or even the loneliness. It's knowing that every day I stay free, Viktor Kozlov gets a little bolder. Every day I don't face justice, he feels more untouchable." Rebecca had been taking notes throughout his story, but now she put down her pen and looked at him directly. "Marcus, what you're describing sounds like textbook self-defense. Why didn't you stay and fight the charges?" "Because I couldn't risk it," Marcus said. "If I had been convicted, if I had been sent to prison, Kozlov would have had me killed within a week. And then, he would have gone after Sarah and Emma anyway, just to send a message. At least this way, they had a chance at a normal life." "Have you had any contact with them since you disappeared?" Marcus shook his head. "I've watched them from a distance a few times. Sarah moved back to her hometown in Ohio. She's working as a school nurse now. Emma is 11 years old and she plays soccer and takes piano lessons. They're safe, and they're happy, and they think I'm a monster." The pain in his voice was raw and immediate. Rebecca had interviewed hundreds of people over the course of her career, but she had rarely heard such genuine anguish. "They don't think you're a monster," Rebecca said gently. "I've spoken to your wife. She's never believed the official story." Marcus looked up sharply. "You've talked to Sarah?" "Several times over the past 3 years. She's been trying to find evidence to clear your name. She hired private investigators, she's been pressuring the police to reopen the case, she's even reached out to the FBI on her own." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "She should let it go," he finally said. "She should forget about me and move on with her life." "Is that what you would do if the situation were reversed?" Marcus considered the question. "No," he admitted. "I would never stop fighting for her." "Then, why would you expect her to give up on you?" Before Marcus could answer, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and felt her pulse quicken. "Agent Chen got my message," Rebecca said. She wants to meet. Tonight. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing between the headstones. That was fast. She's been working this case for years, Marcus. She knows there are holes in the official story. She's probably been waiting for something like this. Where does she want to meet? Rebecca checked the message again. FBI field office, downtown. She says she can guarantee your safety during the initial interview, but, after that, it depends on what deal her supervisors are willing to make. Marcus stopped pacing and looked back toward the cemetery entrance. Once I walk into that building, there's no going back. Even if they don't charge me with murder, I'll probably spend years in prison on the fugitive charges alone. Maybe, Rebecca agreed. But, you'll be alive, and so will your family. And, maybe, just maybe, you'll help take down one of the most dangerous criminals in the city. Marcus was quiet for a long time, weighing his options. Rebecca could see the internal struggle playing out on his face. After 3 years of freedom, even the limited freedom of a fugitive's life, the prospect of imprisonment had to be terrifying. There's something else, Rebecca said finally. Something I didn't tell you earlier. Marcus turned to look at her. Viktor Kozlov's son is getting worse. His heart condition is deteriorating, and he's going to need another surgery soon. Dr. Walsh is a good surgeon, but this case is beyond her experience level. The boy is going to die without the kind of expertise that you have. The impact of this information was immediate and devastating. Marcus grabbed the edge of the stone bench as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. How long does he have? Weeks, maybe a month. And, here's the terrible irony, Marcus. Viktor Kozlov has been trying to destroy your life for 3 years, but his son's only chance of survival is having you perform the surgery. Marcus laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no humor in it. So let me get this straight. The man who wants me dead needs me alive to save his son's life. And, the child whose life I'm morally obligated to save belongs to the man who murdered innocent children to get revenge against me. That's about the size of it. Marcus sat back down, his head in his hands. This is insane. This whole situation is completely insane. Yes, it is, Rebecca agreed. But, insane situations sometimes call for insane solutions. What if we could use this to our advantage? Marcus looked up. What do you mean? What if we could arrange a deal? You surrender yourself to Agent Chen, you cooperate with the FBI investigation, and, in exchange, you're allowed to perform the surgery on Kozlov's son under federal protection. Kozlov gets what he needs to save his child, you get a chance to do what you do best, and the FBI gets the cooperation they need to bring down his entire organization. It was a crazy plan, full of variables and potential dangers. But, as Rebecca watched Marcus consider it, she could see hope flickering in his eyes for the first time since she had met him. Do you think Agent Chen would go for something like that? I think Agent Chen wants Viktor Kozlov in prison more than almost anything else in the world. And, I think she's smart enough to recognize an opportunity when she sees one. Marcus stood up again, but, this time his movement was purposeful rather than anxious. All right, he said. Let's go talk to Agent Chen. But, first, I need you to promise me something. What? If this goes badly, if they arrest me and I disappear into the federal prison system, I need you to make sure Sarah and Emma know the truth. I need you to make sure they understand that everything I did was to protect them. Rebecca nodded. I promise. As they walked back through the cemetery toward her car, Rebecca realized that she was about to be part of one of the strangest news stories of her career. A wanted doctor, a dying child, a crime boss, and an FBI agent were about to come together in a way that would either result in justice being served or in more innocent people dying. Either way, it was going to be a hell of a story. Agent Sarah Chen had been awake for 18 hours straight when Rebecca Martinez's message reached her. She had been reviewing surveillance footage from one of Viktor Kozlov's suspected money laundering operations, looking for any detail that might give her the breakthrough she needed in a case that had consumed 5 years of her life. When her phone buzzed with a message about Marcus Rivera, Sarah's first thought was that it was another false lead. In the 3 years since Rivera had disappeared, the FBI had received hundreds of tips about his whereabouts. Every few months, someone would claim they had seen the fugitive doctor in a different city, usually trying to collect the substantial reward money. All of the leads had turned out to be dead ends. But something about Rebecca Martinez's message was different. The reporter wasn't claiming to have spotted Rivera, she was claiming to have spoken with him directly. And she was specifically requesting a meeting about Rivera's connection to the Kozlov investigation. Sarah had been working organized crime cases long enough to recognize when seemingly unrelated events were actually pieces of the same puzzle. Marcus Rivera's disappearance had always bothered her, not because she thought he was innocent, but because the circumstances surrounding the murders had never made complete sense. Two professional criminals had been killed with a tire iron by a pediatric surgeon with no history of violence. The crime scene had been suspiciously clean of evidence, except for the murder weapon and Rivera's fingerprints. And, most puzzling of all, Rivera had managed to disappear completely despite having no experience with evading law enforcement. In Sarah's experience, people didn't just vanish without help. Someone had been assisting Marcus Rivera, someone with resources and expertise. The question was whether that someone was a criminal organization or something else entirely. Sarah looked at her watch. It was 1:30 in the morning, well past the time when she should have gone home to her empty apartment and tried to get some sleep. But she had learned long ago that the best breaks in difficult cases often came at unexpected times, from unexpected sources. She called Rebecca Martinez back. "Ms. Martinez, this is Agent Chen. I got your message about Marcus Rivera. Are you telling me you've actually spoken with him?" "I'm telling you that I'm sitting in my car outside the FBI field office right now with Dr. Marcus Rivera in my passenger seat. He wants to turn himself in, but only if he can speak with you personally." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. If this was real, if Marcus Rivera was actually ready to surrender, it could be the break she had been waiting for in the cause.